if I'm being completely honest, this portion of this episode was a layup for me. All I had to do was go type a couple things into ChatGPT, and I'm reading what it gave me. Welcome to the Creative Control Room Podcast, episode number 112. I'm your operator, Ryan Hafey. This is my Creative Control Room, and this is a podcast for podcasters. Happy holidays to everyone. I hope everyone had a great Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, Christmas, New Year's, whatever you happen to celebrate. I hope it was fun. Hope it was safe. Hope you got to spend it with your favorite people, and hope it was awesome. In this week's show, we're going to be kind of closing out 2022 and also jumping into 2023 at the same time. I'm actually recording this at the end of 2022, but I know this is publishing at the beginning of 2023, so I thought we would kind of combine the two. What we're going to do first is I'm going to be going over my personal list of my favorite podcasting tools and resources. These are things that I used all throughout the year 2022, and just going to be going through the list and letting you know what I preferred to use for my podcasting workflow in 2022. And then we will also be talking about some trends to watch out for when it comes to the podcasting world for 2023, according to artificial intelligence. That's right. I had a chat with ChatGPT, which if you haven't heard about that, you've been living under a rock. I'll tell you all about it when we get to that portion of the show. But for now, let's jump into my favorite podcasting tools and resources of the year. So I guess you could call this like my end of year awards for podcasting, but it's really not awards. I'm just kind of listing off my favorite things within various categories as far as, you know, my podcast workflow throughout the year. So we're going to go through a few different categories. We've got my favorite gear, software that I use, web-based tools, and also my favorite marketing channels that I use for my podcast and other podcasts that I produce. And I'll also tell you what my favorite podcast is. It's not really a tool or resource, but I guess you could kind of say it is because I get a lot of inspiration from the podcasts I listen to. Anyway, let's first jump into my favorite podcast gear of 2022. And links for a lot of this stuff is going to be in the description below, by the way, if you want to check it out. For starters, just as far as audio is concerned, of course, you have the Shure SM7B. This is kind of like the podcast mic. I think it's about $400 or so at the moment. Just a good all-around mic, pretty good quality out of this thing. Can't really complain. I've had it for 2 or 3 years at this point, and it's never done me wrong. I really enjoy it. Along with this, you have the Rodecaster Pro, which is really an audio interface that was designed specifically for podcasters. And I guess I have the version 1 of the Rodecaster Pro. There is a second version that's out now. I'm told, or at least I hear, that the V2 has kind of fixed a lot of the annoyances and just bugs, not really bugs, but just, little sort of annoyances, I guess is the best word, that come along with this. There are a few, I know, like, the headphone preamps and things like that are a little weird. But even this first version of the Rodecaster, I've really enjoyed. It's worked really well for me. It's got multiple, up to 4 inputs. You can connect it to Bluetooth. It's got a soundboard on it, 4 headphone outputs, lots of different features. If you've got the space for it on your desk, because it is kind of big and you have the budget for it, the Rodecaster Pro is a great podcast-friendly audio interface. Moving on, one of my favorite accessories of this year, if I was to pick a winner of my favorite podcast gear for the year, it would probably be what I'm looking directly at right now, which is the ICANN Homestream Video Conference Teleprompter with 7-inch monitor. It's a long name, but for a while I've been looking, before I got this thing, I was looking for a while for some kind of solution to be able to look into the camera while looking at my notes. And obviously a teleprompter would work great for that. The issue with most teleprompters is that they're ridiculously expensive, especially ones that come with monitors. This one is an affordable version. It's $300 or so. At least when I bought it, it was about $300. It's got an HDMI input. You can connect the little monitor directly to your computer. So every time I do a show, I pop my notes right onto that monitor, and I'm actually looking at my notes as I'm talking to you. And not only is this great for podcasting, it's also great for, if you're on a Zoom call or if you have an interview or something and you want it to seem as though you're making eye contact with the person that you are video conferencing with. This thing has been great. And all it takes is, if you have a camera with a detachable lens, like I've got a Sony a6500 with what do I have in there? 16 to 35 millimeter lens on the camera. And then the teleprompter just slips on the end of the lens. It's been great. Next on my list of gear, I just have really Sony cameras in general. I have 3 Sony cameras in my studio here. I've got the Sony a6500, which I am looking into currently. Right here is the Sony ZV-1, which I've said is probably one of the best all-around Sony cameras that you can have, especially for podcasting. It's portable, clean HDMI output, good quality picture, relatively affordable. And then back here is a camera that I've had for a few years. Hello, it is the Sony RX100 Mark V. Again, another portable camera that's got a clean HDMI output, which is important if you want to be running your camera feed into your computer. I just like Sony cameras in general, whether or not I'd be using them for podcasting. I just think they're good cameras, and they happen to work very well in my studio. So that's why they're on my list of favorite gear. Then, as you just saw in action there, we've got the A10 Mini. There's a few different versions that they have out now. They've got the Mini, they've got the Pro, they've got the Pro Plus or something like that. There's a few versions, but this basically is just a very affordable streaming switcher board. It's a very stream-friendly switcher board. So if you have a multiple camera setup and you want to be able to switch quickly between those camera angles with the push of a button, then you have your A10 Mini. And then we have over here the Elgato Stream Deck. This is just kind of it's like a customizable button board. Works very well and integrates well with OBS, Open Broadcaster software, if you happen to use that to record your podcast or for live streaming. And you can also create custom keys, so you can, create custom buttons for your computer. I use some to switch between desktops on my computer. All sorts of different things you can do with that. Love this thing. And finally, the Godox SL60W, which is the video light, which is just out of frame up here. Now, this light has been around for a few years. It's definitely not one of their newer models. They have some new models now that are still very affordable, a little bit quieter, I think a little bit brighter, some more features and things like that. But I've got a few of these video lights. I think they're only about $150, which is a fantastic price for a video light. So if you need something super affordable, get yourself one of those. Let's move on now to my favorite podcasting software. And number one on the list has to be OBS, Open Broadcaster Software, for many reasons. Number one, it's free. Number two, you can use it for live streaming. Number three, you can use it for screen recordings or just recording inbound video feeds. There's all sorts of stuff that you can do with it. You can put overlays on it and little transition stingers. For a free software, a free open source software, you really get a lot with OBS. So I personally don't see a reason to go out of your way to pay a bunch of money unless you're doing, big time broadcast production work. There's really no reason to get anything out other than OBS for streaming. I love it. I have to put Zoom on the list as well of podcasting software. I know it's not, or at least so I've heard. I haven't actually experimented with other options yet, but I've heard, like a Riverside FM, I believe is a video conferencing software that people say gives you a little bit better quality than Zoom. But as far as like industry standards go, Zoom's very versatile. It's allows you to record if you do interviews with people. Zoom's just kind of the go-to for a lot of people. I've used it a lot. Actually, in fact, in my last episode where I interviewed Sean Porter, we used Zoom. So Zoom is great. Notion is another piece of software on my list. I'm actually looking at my Notion app right now. This is where I do all of my to-do lists, all of my note-taking, and I'm sure I haven't even scratched the surface of how to use Notion. I know there's a lot of different add-ons and things you can use with it, but for me, it's note-taking, and I kind of use it almost as a teleprompter when I'm doing my podcast. So I use the free version of Notion. I have never had a need to pay for Notion at all. So Notion's kind of like Google Keep or like Evernote. So if you are in need of something like that, check out Notion. There's a little bit of a learning curve with it, but once you start kind of filling it out, if you're anything like me, you won't be able to live without it. Then we got to talk about the Adobe products. I'm a big Adobe guy. So Adobe Premiere Pro, Adobe Photoshop, and Adobe Audition are kind of my go-tos. And you could throw Adobe After Effects in there as well. The intro of my show was created in Adobe After Effects. Premiere Pro, obviously for video editing. Every episode that I finish is edited and finalized within Premiere Pro. I also do most of my audio editing within Premiere Pro because a lot of the effects that are available in Audition, which is their audio editor, are available in Premiere Pro. If I ever need to do anything a little bit more intensive, I'll move over to Audition, but most of the time it's in Premiere. Then you have Photoshop, of course, for thumbnails. You can't do any better than Photoshop. Photoshop's just the best. And then After Effects, like I said earlier, After Effects is great for doing kind of animations and things like that. And I'm not that great at After Effects, but I know enough about it to kind of get by. And then we'll talk about web-based tools. These are my favorite web-based tools. I don't use a ton, to be honest. There's one that I use. It's called capitalizemytitle.com. This one is really, I use it as a character counter for my YouTube titles, for my episode titles, but also it will capitalize your title in like with proper grammar. You know, sometimes you're writing a title like, wait a minute, should this word be capitalized or not? It will auto-correct for you which words should be capitalized and which ones shouldn't. Just a super easy free website to use. Of course, you have Restream. If you haven't heard of Restream, go check it out. If you do live streaming, Restream is great. It allows you to basically, if you use OBS, you can kind of shoot out one feed and it'll go to YouTube and Facebook and Twitter and really wherever you want to. They've got there's a free version that allows you to stream to a certain amount of platforms. And then there's a paid version where you can stream to a whole bunch. But Restream is great. Highly recommended. And then of course you have Anchor.fm. Anchor, I call this a web-based tool. Anchor is just basically a audio podcast hosting platform. And the reason that I like Anchor is it's 100% free. Their business model is they have some built-in advertising options for you. So if you get popular enough, or if Anchor kind of identifies that there are certain advertisers that may fit with your podcast, you can record ads that will be added into your podcast directly through the platform. And then, you know, they'll take, if there's any proceeds from it, they'll take a cut, you'll get a cut. So you can kind of earn some money on it, but then, but everything's kind of built right in, but you don't have to pay for it. Like there's, you know, Libsyn, I think is another podcast hosting platform that is a paid platform. But if you want to keep it free, you want to keep it simple, it's very simple to use as well to upload a new episode. Anchor.fm is where it's at. And then my favorite social media channels for podcast marketing. YouTube ranks at the top of the list. You know, before I restarted this podcast, and I use YouTube a lot for some other podcasts that I produce as well, but before I restarted this one, I wasn't doing a whole lot with YouTube as far as clips, and especially with YouTube Shorts. YouTube Shorts, it has by far been the best driver of views and new subscribers for me so far in YouTube. I've talked about this before. Platforms like YouTube are kind of, you know, they're trying to compete with TikTok, which is also on the list. TikTok kind of, you know, YouTube Shorts was YouTube's answer to TikTok's popularity. You've probably heard about TikTok, you know, people on TikTok having overnight success. YouTube's trying to get a piece of that pie. YouTube Shorts is what they introduced to try to compete with the popularity of TikTok. So naturally, they're going to be promoting YouTube Short content to get people to use that feature more. and try to steal some of the attention away from TikTok. So that means that when you post to YouTube Shorts, you have a better chance of getting a little bit more exposure from your content. So if you're able to take your podcast and repurpose it into some vertical video, post it on YouTube Shorts in conjunction with some of your other content, do that. And I guarantee if you're consistent with it, you will see some results, or at the very least, some more views. So again, in that same vein, you also have TikTok. Again, seeing a lot of views on TikTok. And then Instagram Reels. I'm starting to see less engagement on Reels the farther we go. It seems like Reels may be maturing over on the Instagram side a little bit. Or I'm just doing a bad job over there. I don't know. But Instagram Reels is, again, just kind of Instagram's response to TikTok. But those three, again, short form content, vertical video, right now, that's where it's at. So leverage those if you can to really get some extra exposure for your podcast. And then finally, I listed off my top 4 favorite podcasts of the year. Again, these aren't really tools or resources. However, I do find that I get a lot of inspiration and ideas from listening to the shows that I'm most interested in. So number 1 would be the Lex Fridman podcast. I love the long form conversational style podcasts. Lex Fridman often has a lot of very interesting guests on. He has very thoughtful questions. They have very engaging conversations, even on topics that I'm typically not interested in. You know, they're able to have conversations that keep my interest. And you can just kind of turn it on and let it play all the way through. They're usually like anywhere from 2 to 4 hours long. So you don't really run out of content there. Next, I have Congratulations with Chris D'Elia. I've always been a big Chris D'Elia fan. I think he's hilarious. His podcast is funny. Again, if I just kind of want to relax and chill, have a good laugh, I'll pop his podcast on and get a little chuckle in. You have the Colin and Samir show. I think that kind of goes without saying. If you haven't checked out that podcast, definitely do. They talk a lot about the creator economy, talk a lot about podcasting, lots of great information coming from those guys. And I think number 4 I have, and these aren't the only 4 podcasts I listen to, obviously, but these are probably my top 4. The 4th would be The Future, Futur, with Chris Do. Chris, that's D-O. The Future with Chris Do. Chris Do is a marketing guy. He's an educator. Talks a lot about, he helps out creatives and, people who maybe own their own businesses, designers and things like that, helps them educate them to work better with brands, to earn more money. He's very business savvy, helps people develop their businesses. He's one of these guys that just has a lot of good information that he has to offer, but B, he brings in a lot of interesting guests that offer a lot of cool information as well. So that is also one of my favorite podcasts. 2022 was a big year for podcasting, and according to ChatGPT, it's only going to get better in 2023. So I had a conversation with ChatGPT, which, by the way, if you're not familiar, ChatGPT is basically like an artificial intelligence chatbot. If you're old school like me, and if you remember playing or chatting with Smarter Child, if you ever got on AOL Instant Messenger back in the day, there was this chatbot you could talk to called Smarter Child, and you could ask it questions, and it would give you reasonably realistic responses, like human-like responses, but it was very limited. It couldn't recall parts of your conversation. Like it couldn't, it would basically like a direct response to your question, kind of one-to-one interaction, if that makes sense. ChatGPT is way more advanced, and it can recall previous things in your conversation. It can give super long, in-depth suggestions and responses to your queries. You can ask it, you can give it a prompt, and it can write you full stories. I think I asked my 11-year-old son, to give ChatGPT a prompt for a story. And I think he said something like, write me a story about Ronald McDonald eating Lysol wipes or something bizarre like that. And ChatGPT wrote an entire story with a beginning, a middle, an end, a whole plot, everything. And it was incredibly bizarre. But anyway, it's OpenAI's ChatGPT. So go check it out if you haven't. Moving on, I asked ChatGPT to tell me about some podcast trends to look out for in 2023. So I have its results. I don't know what you call it. I guess just it, right? I have its results written down here. So I'm going to read through these and then and comment on some of these here as we go. There's 10 total trends that it gave me. In fact, it gave me 5. And then I said, can you be more specific? And then it gave me 5 more. So this is what ChatGPT said about podcast trends for 2023. First off, continued growth in popularity. Podcasting has experienced significant growth in recent years, and this trend is likely to continue in the coming years as more and more people discover the medium and start listening to podcasts on a regular basis. We've seen that in 2022 and in previous years. I think 2022 again was a big year for podcasting, and I would fully agree with that. Number 2, increased use of artificial intelligence. Oh, shocking! An artificial intelligence would suggest that it's going to be more useful with podcasting in the new year. It says AI and machine learning technologies are being used in a variety of ways in the podcast industry, such as to transcribe audio, generate transcriptions, and even create new content. This is new content that AI created right now. It is possible that these technologies will become more widely adopted and integrated into the production of podcasts in the future. The way that people are talking about AI and ChatGPT right now, I 100% agree with that. I think, again, this was, if I'm being completely honest, this portion of this episode was a layup for me. All I had to do was go type a couple things into ChatGPT, and I'm reading what it gave me. So, call me lazy, I guess, if you want, but this is probably going to be more prevalent in podcasting and just content creation in general. Number 3, greater use of multimedia. Most podcasts are already incorporating multimedia elements such as videos and images into their episodes. This trend is likely to continue as more podcast creators look for ways to engage their audience and stand out in a crowded marketplace. Just think about how far podcasting has evolved. It started as audio only. You almost can't call podcasts anymore in a sense, because it's a little bit of everything. You've got audio, you've got video, you've got micro content. There's so many ways that you can just expand your content mix now when it comes to podcasting. So where does the podcast end and the rest begin? I don't know, but I would agree with ChatGPT here. I think it's only going to continue to evolve as far as how people are, the creative ways that people are incorporating other types of media into podcasts. Number 4, more diverse and inclusive content. The podcast industry has been criticized for a lack of diversity and inclusivity, and it is possible that we will see more podcasts that feature diverse voices and perspectives in the coming years. Has podcasting really been? I guess so. I guess it's been accused of not being as diverse. But if you remember back in episode 106, I went over a report from a company called AdLarge, and they were talking about diversity in podcasting and how it's becoming more diverse. For example, 58% of 18 to 44-year-olds in the United States said that they listened to podcasting in the past week. So the younger audiences are coming into the podcast world, but also 41% of listeners happen to be non-white. That compares to 76% of the US population, which is white. So again, the podcast audience is more diverse, which is probably an indication that, people who produce podcasts, that audience, or, those people are going to become, that group is going to be more diverse as well. I think, it's just the natural progression of things. If you have a diverse group of people engaging or listening to a certain type of content, they're probably more likely to become involved in that as well. So again, I agree with ChatGPT. I think we will see more diversity in the world of podcasting. Number 5, you have greater monetization efforts. As the podcast industry matures and becomes more competitive, it's likely that creators will look for more ways to monetize their content, such as through sponsorships, merchandise, and premium subscription models. I think this is just a natural progression, not just with podcasting, but just with content creators in general. It's interesting how content creators have been able to turn being a creator into a full-on, business. In the ways that some of these creators are monetizing is very interesting. So yes, I agree. It'd be interesting to see how that evolves again in the podcasting world in 2023. Number 6, greater focus on long form content. While many podcasts are relatively short, there has been a trend towards larger, more in-depth content in recent years. This trend is likely to continue as more listeners seek out podcasts that provide a deeper dive into a particular topic or issue. I would, the aforementioned Lex Fridman podcast is a very long form. You have the Joe Rogan podcast, which has been around for years. I really like the kind of sit down conversational, just very laid back style podcast. That's personally me, but I'm curious how long that will keep people engaged, because I think the more that people do that, the more that people kind of take on that format, the more saturated it's going to get, and then people are going to kind of have to figure out new ways to keep people interested. Maybe I could be wrong about that, but I do think there's a lot of value right now in the long form format. So interesting to see. We should revisit these. I'll have to keep these written down, and at the end of 2023, see how many of these actually came true. Number 7, increased use of podcasts for marketing and advertising. Podcasts have become an increasingly popular medium for brands to reach consumers, and it's possible that we will see more companies using podcasts as marketing and advertising platforms in the future. Again, going back to episode 106 in that at-large report, in 2021, U.S. podcast revenues exceeded $1 billion for the first time. In fact, they reached $1.4 billion, and 54% of marketers surveyed said that they plan to increase their podcast investments. It already seems like that's happening. Companies are definitely seeing the value of advertising when it comes to podcasts. So I would agree there. Number 8, more podcasts produced by traditional media organizations. In recent years, we have seen an increase in the number of podcasts produced by traditional media organizations such as news outlets and radio stations. It is possible that this trend will continue as these organizations look to expand their reach and take advantage of the growing popularity of podcasts. Of course, we've seen that a lot. We've seen that everywhere. I think just as companies started, jumping on social media when social media grew popular, they're going to do the same with podcasts. They already have, and they're going to continue to do so. If there's an opportunity for a company to get their message out more broadly through something like a podcast, they're going to do it. That seems pretty self-explanatory. Number 9, greater focus on podcast production quality. As the podcast industry becomes more competitive, it's likely that creators will place a greater emphasis on production quality in order to stand out and attract listeners. This could involve investing in better equipment, hiring professional editors and producers, and generally putting more effort into the overall production of their podcasts. The more competition that you have, the harder it is to stand out. And podcasting has become very saturated, very popular. You have a lot more people entering the industry. So yeah, of course, you're going to have it's going to be harder to stand out there. So creators are going to have to do something whether that's just really give a boost to the quality of the content, or again, try to increase their production value with whether that be through lighting and cameras and audio and things like that, or with the actual editing and images and things like that, like the final edit of the podcast itself. I think it's going to have to happen. And there's a lot of people that are doing really interesting things with podcasts. So it'd be interesting to see where that goes. And finally, number 10, more use of interactive and immersive elements. Some podcast creators are experimenting with interactive and immersive elements in their shows, such as using branching narratives or incorporating live events. It is possible that we will see more podcasts incorporating these types of elements in the future as creators look for ways to engage their audiences in new and innovative ways. Yeah, live events. I would concur with that. Again, it just comes down to, I think the competitiveness is really what's going to drive the innovation in podcasting. Podcasting is already popular. It's going to continue to grow in popularity. People are going to have to do some really interesting and cool things to stand out and make a mark in the industry. And, finding ways to use more interactive and immersive elements, as ChatGPT says. I think that'll be very important. But there you go. There's 10 podcast trends for 2023 to look out for. Just remind me at the end of the year, we'll come back and revisit these and see how right ChatGPT was. All right. Well, I hope everyone had a wonderful and safe New Year's. I'm looking forward to taking this podcast to new heights in 2023 and providing a lot of value. Speaking of which, if you got any value out of this episode, please consider liking and subscribing wherever you happen to be watching or listening. Follow me on social media at Ryan Hafey on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. Check out the description for relevant links and geared recommendations, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.